Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Hope you are having a wonderful long weekend. I currently am having a great weekend myself, but thank you for joining me today because we have a lot to talk about in terms of weather here throughout the East Coast. Looks like we're going to have rounds of storms here to work their way through, really going through the end of January, I think. And with that, what that's going to do is give us a lot of close calls for a lot of places here in terms of winter weather and snow. So, while I think with this pattern, a lot of us will see rain, some people will likely get a pretty good amount of snow with this jet stream pattern that is setting up. If you're likely to get snow once, you might be likely to get it multiple times with this active pattern. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to talk about the weather for this week, including a big storm that is going to produce some severe weather as well as winter weather, much like the storm we just dealt with this past week. It looks like we get something very similar to that again this week. So we're going to cover that. But if you're new here, my name is Gerald. I am a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And I would love for you to like the video if you like it. And go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell because we have a lot of active weather coming up. And I want you to be informed about that. So that's enough of me talking about myself. Let's go ahead and get right into the forecast for you. So looking at our satellite imagery this afternoon, finally clearing out here across the eastern United States after such a busy last 72 hours, really, after we had to deal with that last storm. And you can even see this is that secondary low that we've been talking about that did end up forming and even produce some snow here into eastern North Carolina yesterday. Around the Raleigh area, and even as far south as Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, saw some flurries this morning. So super cool for those areas that, even though it wasn't a very impactful storm, you can at least say that you saw snowflakes fall in your backyard this year. So that is always super cool. But luckily, clearing out here in the east as the west is still dealing with just this continual onshore flow, which I know is going to be a pretty big deal today for that wild card game in San Francisco if you plan on watching that. But looking at our current hazards here, really cleared out pretty well across the east. We do have some of these wind chill watches and warnings and freeze watches and warnings here through Florida. With this system that's moved through in that cold front, really feels a lot more like January today here across the southeast. And that will continue through this week as we begin to warm up going into the beginning of next week. But we do have those watches and warnings in Florida for those cold temperatures. And you can see that whenever we look at tonight's lows, which I will show you in just a second. But what I did want to do is talk about all that snow that we got here in the mountains of North Carolina, West Virginia over this past weekend. I know some places here in the mountains of North Carolina got near 2 feet of snow. So really a winter that has gone from not much to, feet of snow within a 72-hour period for some of us. Although that wasn't widespread, there was widespread snow nonetheless across the mountains of North Carolina. And that snow even got into a place like Asheville. And even saw some flurries here in my neck of the woods in upstate South Carolina yesterday. So quite a powerful northwest flow event that we were dealing with. So with that, though, that was able to happen with this cold air that is funneled in behind that front. And these are tonight's lows, getting below freezing pretty far south here into Florida. So if you're in Florida and you're seeing those cold temperatures, you'll actually be colder in most parts of Florida tonight than you will be in Kansas City, Missouri. So just kind of some interesting bits of information there with tonight's low temperatures. Look at tomorrow's high temperatures, pretty average January day, I would say, here into the southeast. Temperatures into the 50s and then 40s, 30s here in the mid-Atlantic. And then, below freezing for our friends up into northern New England. Looking at the high temperatures for MLK Day going on to Monday. Again, a bit warmer than it will be tomorrow for most of us here in the east as that cold front kind of begins to lose some of, its energy, and we get ready for that next system to move through that will eventually help to bring in some warmer Gulf air for most of us in the east. Something I do want to touch on is the chance of some snow going into this evening here for some of us into southeastern New England. I do expect a bit of a band to set up where some people get 1 to 3 inches of snow out of this. So, although not blockbuster, again, this is an area that hadn't seen much snow so far this year. So, this is going into this afternoon and evening. You can see some of those blue colors there into Massachusetts. Although not much here on this model, I do think somebody will get a pretty good band of that snow. And then once again, whenever we go into tomorrow, especially here on the Cape, getting the chance of some of that precipitation to overlap with those colder temperatures, producing some of that snow, and then potentially more of those bands of snow pushing on shore into sections of Maine going into your Sunday night. So, how much snow are we talking about with this little system? Not too much here, but enough to mention it. Again, I think we'll get a band of 1 to 3 inches here into southeastern Massachusetts, and then once we get those other bands of snow to move in, maybe even 3 to 5 inches possible in portions of Maine out of that. All right, so other than that, let's go ahead and talk about the weather going into this week and that next big system that we have to worry about for most of us here in the eastern United States. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that here. Relatively dry until we get into Monday night and Tuesday here into the east. That's whenever we're going to get the smaller system to move through. And this isn't the main system. This is just, I guess, an appetizer, if you will. And it won't be too impactful, but do expect some showers to move through a big section of the east central United States going into your Monday evening and Tuesday. Before that small system and those, showers move out going into your Wednesday, but that's whenever we set the stage for this next big system to get cranking here over the plains, and that will move into the east, causing severe weather here into sections of the south, and then a band of snow here to the north side of that system. So we're going to talk about all of that here in just a minute, but let's go ahead and move through this entire storm. Again, that line of storms is going to move through the south, going through your Wednesday and Thursday, and then on the north side of this system, you see we get a band of snow here. Right now, I'd say sections of the northern Midwest and northern New England are most favored for this band of snow to move through. So if you're in those areas, I really think you have the best chance of getting that snow. But as for the rain, again, we're going to get rain just about everywhere here in the east out of this system. And we'll watch for that severe weather threat here into the southeast. I don't think this will be as potent as the last system we had, but still could definitely cause some severe weather going into next week, really about the same time frame that we had this past week with this system as well. So moving this ahead, again, you see some of that snow here into northern New England, and then you also saw that move through the Midwest. This is going into your Thursday night here. It looks like this finally begins to clear out, other than some rain and snow left over in the Northeast. And we should begin to clear out going into next Friday and next weekend from this storm before potentially we get more rounds of those storms that we've been talking about. And I'm not going to go in depth on these storms, but I will just show you real quick. You see, after we get through that storm going into next weekend, we kind of get this just round and train of storms to move through the eastern United States. It really looks like we're going to get the jet stream to kind of set up shop right here along the Appalachian spine. So again, it's pretty typical January pattern I would expect here. A lot more of those cooler, rainier days in the southeast compared to those spring-like kind of severe days, and then a lot of very close calls into the northeast for snow going into the long range. But we'll talk more about that later. Let's continue to talk about this current storm that we are dealing with. So that was the GFS model. Let's go and look at our Euro model now. Again, this is that small system on Tuesday that will cause some rainy conditions here for some of us in the east. But that'll clear out before Wednesday we get our next big system. And once again here on Wednesday, I would expect some severe weather here into sections of the southeast before getting a band of snow to set up on the northern side of this system. So another dynamic system. It seems that's kind of been the story of 2023 so far. Again, though, here we'll watch for that severe weather into the southeast going through next Wednesday and Thursday. I don't think it'll be as potent as this past storm, but nonetheless, we'll have that chance of severe weather likely. And then you get that snowier weather here on the north side. I think a place like Chicago, Green Bay, Milwaukee, a good section of Michigan could get a good thumping of snow out of this system. And then once again, sections of northern New England, even a place like Boston still in play with this storm. We'll have time to, watch the trends, but I think in Boston, although you're not favored, I would look more for a place like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Still, nonetheless, we'll see. Can get some snow out of this. And then this, once again, clears out going into next weekend before, again, we continue that train of storms going through the end of January. All right, so looking at the severe weather component of this storm, you can see the Storm Prediction Center has already outlined an area here, and this is at 5 days out. So this is next Wednesday, already talking about that threat of severe weather here. Through Shreveport, Louisiana, Jackson, Mississippi. Sections of southeastern Texas are in this threat as well. So we'll look at some of those ingredients here. These are the dew points going into next Wednesday. You see plenty good enough to get some of that severe weather with this warm sector bringing dew points up into the 60s. And then on top of that, we have those strong winds in the jet stream creating wind shear here in this area as well. So that's why the Storm Prediction Center has outlined this section and this area for storms. Again, it is still 5 days out, so we have plenty of time to iron out the details here and see if this threat will also continue further east. But either way, if I'm in the southeast, I'm keeping my eyes on this because as we've already seen, 2023 has already been very destructive in terms of some of these severe storms here into the southeast. And that it's kind of felt like a trend over the past couple winters that Dixie Alley has really lit up with these severe weather episodes. So we'll see if that trend continues going into next week as well. All right, so talking about the snow chances now with this next system. Again, I show this map all the time, but this is just the chance of seeing at least an inch of snow from our ensembles within a 24-hour period. So, the brighter the colors you see, the higher the chance there is of that snow accumulating past an inch. So we'll start with our GFS ensembles here. Again, you get kind of that little blip of chances of snow going into this weekend here into southeastern Massachusetts, so we'll watch for that. But that system begins to clear out, and then once we get here into next Wednesday and Thursday, you see that system cranking up, and we'll begin to start causing some of that snow to fall here into the plains and work its way through the northern Midwest and into the Northeast, and we'll watch that unfold here with our ensembles. So let me get that off the screen for you. Anyway, though, yeah, here we go. You see those chances really extending here through the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. As we move this forward, you see especially northern New England here getting in on those chances of accumulating snowfall from the system. And then after that, we'll look to see more scattered chances of this snow as more storms continue to work their way up the East Coast. All right, so that's the GFS. Let's look at our Euro ensembles as well and see if we have some similarities. Again, starting this weekend, the Euro more bullish than the GFS here on that chance of snow into southeastern New England, where you see a lot more of those higher totals than the GFS showed, or at least higher chances, I should say. That moves out, though, and then once we get into this next storm, again here into Kansas City, up towards Iowa, starting off on your Thursday, getting those chances of snow out of this next system. And then that moves here into the Great Lakes, and really good agreement here with the Euro ensembles through Chicago, most of Michigan, seeing those chances of snow. And as well as the Northeast, the Euro here really balloons these totals, or the chance of these totals getting higher here. And a place like Boston here on the edge, but I think definitely Vermont, New Hampshire, upstate New York, just about all of Maine compared to last time where it looked like just the northern tip of Maine got that snow with the last storm. I think a big section of northern New England here gets a good swath of snow out of this storm. And then going into next weekend, that looks to finally clear out. So looking at the long range here, let's look at these ensembles and see what it looks like the pattern will be going long term. So we'll start with the GFS here. You can see we get, this blue area here in the center of the country is that storm we're dealing with next week. And you see that will begin to work its way through. And here in the GFS, you see these blues kind of set up shop here about a bit more than a week out here across a big section of the central part of the country and really the lower 48 as a whole, getting in on that cooler, stormier weather. So we'll watch out for that. And then as we get past the 10-day period, the GFS really wants to dump that cold air down out west and kind of really flexes this ridge over the East Coast. So what this would kind of do is set up the jet stream like this, and that's what we're going to be looking for here. Looks like that round of storms going to work their way kind of up the Appalachian chain long term. So the chances of snow increasing into these areas, and then likely a cold rain into areas of the southeast long term here. I'm going to use a different color so you can see. Again, I think the chance of colder rain more likely in the southeast, more seasonable January weather, while the chances of snow likely increasing into these areas with this kind of storm track. But nonetheless, colder weather out west and a storm track kind of running right through the east with this pattern. All right, so that is the GFS. Looking at the Euro ensembles here, Going long term, this is, well, first of all, this is that storm that we're dealing with next week, just to point that out. Then as we move this further ahead into time, you see those blue colors working their way here into the lower 48, indicating that cooler weather and stormier weather before eventually going long term. Again, the Euro kind of agrees here with the GFS. We get that cooler weather here into the central plains, not as far west here on the Euro ensembles. But nonetheless, they do agree on this kind of southeast ridge flexing its way here into the eastern half of the country, giving us a storm track kind of like this. So pretty good agreement there, and this can shift further to the east or the west, so this very well could change to a storm track, doing something a bit closer to this or even something like this. There's still plenty of time to determine, but either way, it does look like an active storm track moving through the east long term. And then going even longer term here, the Euro continues to dump that cold air further out west. All right, so what does this mean in terms of weather? This is our 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. And although a lot more normal here into the east, still above average temperatures more likely than below average temperatures. You can see we kind of have that bullseye for the colder weather currently out west in the long term. With more average temperatures here into the central part of the country, and then along the coast, those warmer temperatures are expected. In terms of precipitation, again with the active storm track that I think is going to set up, likely getting above average precipitation through a big chunk here of the eastern United States from this pattern that we will be changing into. So if you want to see snow in the east, again, we're still relatively early in January here. We're about the middle of January. And we still have all of February to work with, so plenty of time to get some snow here in the east. And we just got some too. So with that snow that fell in the mountains and even sections of New England. So more January-like weather ahead for us, I think. And just kind of average January weather. We'll see if we can get those storm tracks to set up in a favorable way for us. But if not, we still have all of February. But if you liked the video, I'd love for you to hit the like button. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe because we have a lot coming up. And let me know also where you're watching from and what you want to see through the rest of January. But with all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow.